You picked Rogue because you wanted to be the main character, but instead of making those flashy plays that make noobs Alt F4, you're getting pummeled into the dirt by every brainless warrior and ret paladin on the ladder. Let's cut to the chase. Rogue definitely isn't easy. It's a spec that punishes your mistakes harder than almost anything else in the game. But after analyzing hundreds of games from across our community, we've realized that most rogues aren't losing because of complicated mechanics, but a few simple and fixable mistakes. So if you're tired of feeling hard stuck, we're going to teach you 4 reasons why you might be sucking at Rogue. And we will start with what might be the number 1 mistake, not harassing the healer as much as you should be. But let's back up a bit. Most rogues have the right intuition to CC the enemy healer at the start of each game. They'll try to land a sap, and if anything goes wrong, maybe they'll toss in a cheap shot, kidney, or Garrett, depending on their spec. It's also true that most rogues have the intuition to blind the enemy healer mid-game, ideally during a moment where there's already pressure in order to force out a trinket. And good rogues, they'll even know that it's still possible to blind sap as long as you stun first. As long as the healer gets stunned for at least a second before the blind lands, that usually gives enough time to drop combat for a sap, as long as nothing weird happens. But CCing the healer in the opener and trying to land a good blind mid-game are just the first 2 levels of harassment possible. A level above this, and we have the mid-game gouges and stuns on the healer too. Now, unless you're playing with a hunter who regularly goes for CC, chances are the healer will not be on one of these DRs. This means if you have enough mobility, you can and should regularly harass the healer, especially before bursting. Of course, sub-rogues have an advantage here, because you can pretty consistently stun the healer before dancing the kill target, but all 3 rogue specs still have gouge, and even Garrett is a fantastic tool for keeping the healer locked down and miserable. Okay, but that was only still level 3. What more could we possibly do to harass the healer all game? Well, what many people overlook is the fact that rogues are one of the few melee in the game with a ranged interrupt. Okay, so obviously Shadow Step Kick isn't exactly the same as Counterspell, but it's damn close. But how and when should you be step kicking the healer? Let's check out this clip from Waz. He's about to step kick the healer, but why? Well, first of all, everyone, including the shaman, is already on stun DR. Meanwhile, his healer is stuck in CC, and if this hex lands, he could lose momentum. He's also about to have gouge up, which means even if he uses his kick on the healer, he still has a stop for the boomkin. This is a textbook situation to step kick, saving his healer while buying time for DRs to reset. But what is the final level for truly making a healer miserable? Swapping to them, of course. This is our final level because knowing when to swap is a bit tricky, but there are some clues that make it an obvious play. This is going to sound backwards, but one of the best times to swap to a healer is after they have taken a CC chain. Here's the scenario you're looking for. Both DPS are on a DR for stun and the healer is not. You and your team did your burst, but damage is starting to slow down. If you want to keep up momentum, turn to the enemy healer. At this point, they have a lot of catch-up work to do and will absolutely hate the fact that they now have to deal with a rogue standing in their face to stun or kick. Alright, but let's step back again and talk about the opener, where everyone knows that all you need to do is sap the healer and stun the kill target. Yeah, maybe in 2006, but things aren't that straightforward. You can't play a version of Rogue that doesn't exist anymore. You need to see how the literal best players in the world are actually solving these modern problems. That's why we just overhauled the SkillCapped Rogue courses from the ground up by giving you a direct arena playbook used by Rank 1 gladiators to dismantle the current meta. We don't just show you a rotation, we break down what goes into making your shadow dances insanely effective. And if you're tired of getting bullied by stupid melee, we have videos on how to make their lives miserable, including a brand new course that teaches you how to counter the most popular specs with modern, practical advice. Our courses pair seamlessly with Arena Coach and the SkillCapped UI. While the videos give you the blueprint, our add-on cleans up your UI, and Arena Coach acts as your personal 24/7 mentor. All of this is covered under a single subscription, which costs as little as $7.99 a month and is backed up by a no-questions-asked money-back guarantee. And if you click the link below, you will even get an exclusive discount. For now, let's get back to openers. First of all, let's address a myth. There are some times where you probably shouldn't sap the healer, but more on that in a second. Instead, what we first need to talk about are the 9 million obstacles you need to avoid in order to get that perfect opener. First, you need to look out for CC immunities, specifically nullifying Shroud, which is now much easier for Preservation Evokers to proc since it is tied into a rotational ability. Now, luckily, removing Shroud is pretty simple. Just make sure to try and dodge their root first, since good Evokers will try and shoot it out. Then a single sap will instantly remove Shroud, allowing you to sap for real, assuming the Evoker doesn't enter combat. And speaking about CC immunities, good warriors might try and Berserker Roar before you open. This gives their whole team a buff that reduces the next CC by 50%. Seems annoying, but luckily this buff is actually an Enrage, which means a simple Shiv can remove it on the target you want to stun. Good warriors might also try and Blade Storm your opener once their healer gets sapped, and there's really no way to easily play around this other than patience. Then there's a minefield of obstacles you have to deal with against other classes, including Flare. Again, this is an ability that can be hard to play around, but typically hunters will flare in the center of the map, which means your stealth routes should probably be somewhere near the edge of the map if possible. Then there is Earth Grab Totem. This pesky bastard not only procs immediately when summoned, but also pulses every few seconds. Just like Flare, shamans will typically put it somewhere on the center of the map, so just be sure to avoid it once it's down. Then there are Demon Hunters. Spectral Sight is the #1 threat that starts immediately as the gates open. Blizzard decided to give the best hero class of all time an ability that is literally an ultimate or even a cheat code in other games. Here's where things get crazy. The new DevDH spec. They can use Spectral Sight to get you out of stealth from a ridiculous range. 50 yards to be exact, which means you need to do 3 things. Number 1, try and get to a pillar immediately, then set your target or focus to the DH. Number 2, look at the direction they are moving and try to move opposite of them as they push up. Then number 3, if you can, try and step sap the enemy healer before you get caught. 90% of the time, it's going to be a good idea to sprint in the opener to try and land your sap on the healer. With 2 charges of sap and vanish, we're not really limited by mobility anyway, so sprint is an easy throwaway. Okay, but earlier we mentioned that sometimes you don't actually need to sap the healer, but why? Well, if you're playing with a hunter who isn't completely useless, there's a good chance they will intim trap the enemy healer in the opener anyway, which means you can simply sap the off target instead. Just be sure to coordinate this in advance. Now, of course, one of the trickiest parts of playing any melee is managing mobility, especially against mages who seem to blink and vanish every 5 seconds. Maybe you've watched a rank 1 rogue waddle their way to their target, thinking to yourself, why don't they just shadow step? Are these rogues just ignoring their cooldowns? Not at all. In fact, it's the opposite. They know they have step up, but they're holding onto it on purpose. What rank 1 sub-rogues understand is that uptime isn't always needed, and they are prioritizing shadow step not for uptime, but for damage or CC. Instead of thinking of shadow step like a mobility cooldown, it's useful to think of it as part of your burst or part of your CC. If you have trouble staying connected against mages, it's probably because you're shadow stepping too much, which again sounds totally backwards, we know. But what do you think is going to happen if you step dance a mage? They're just going to blink. Then you step stun them again, and what happens? They just blink a second time, and now you're completely stuck. So, how do we stay connected? This is where we need to be a bit creative, using Death from Above not for damage, but as a secondary shadow step. But now let's flip the script, because sometimes rogues make the mistake of thinking they need too much uptime. But wait a second, isn't this what melee want, to stay on target 24/7? Of course, but there's an obvious problem. Even though we're a bit tankier these days and have a ton of defensives to fall back on, we don't have the luxury of being passively tanky. While warriors have plate armor and defensive stance, we need to pre-feint stuns to survive, and if we don't, that's GG. In other words, we're definitely not designed to be brawlers, but that's fine. Because the advantage of playing sub or assassination rogue is that you don't need to constantly deal damage. For one, as a sub rogue, you really don't do that much damage outside of dance, and if everyone is on DR and dance is down, your backstabs really aren't contributing much. And as Asa, since most of our damage comes from bleeds, as long as Garrett and Rupture are up, we don't really lose too much by pulling away. Of course, the elephant in the room is Outlaw Rogue, which actually does benefit from a lot of uptime thanks to cooldown reduction, but that's why Outlaw has nearly 20% more stamina and more versatility compared to other rogues. Now, does all of this mean that you should constantly reset to the pillar like it's Miss of Pandaria again? Definitely not. But if you find yourself dying over and over, especially to melee, it's probably because you're staying in trying to backstab that warrior who is chunking you for half your health bar. And luckily, we have the perfect tools to actually kite melee: Crippling Poison and Shiv. By default, our slow is 66%, and when Shiv is pressed, it's over 80. This allows us to perform the age-old trick known as weaning, where all we need to do is simply Shiv enemy targets and walk away. And look, if your biggest headache right now is getting absolutely ran over by cleaves, you need to check out our brand new Rogue courses, which are packed with modern, practical advice specifically designed to turn the tables on those brainless, tier-list chasers, including some next-level tips on how to use Smoke Bomb. We've even updated our Melee Master in Minutes course, which teaches rank 1 level mechanics that you can use on any melee spec. Both courses pair perfectly with Arena Coach and the SkillCapped UI. Our custom add-on strips away the clutter from your screen, while Arena Coach acts as your personal 24/7 high-rated mentor tracking your mistakes in real time. You can unlock access to everything under a single subscription for as little as $7.99 a month and is backed by a no-questions-asked money-back guarantee. If you want to stop sucking at Rogue and start climbing the ladder, click the link below right now to claim an exclusive discount. For now, we want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.